and welcome to Metamapping. I'm Em,
I'm Jackson.
and we're here to talk about our second episode. This aired December 27th, 2013. This is back before we did end-of-year episodes because we only had 2 podcasts.
This feels like forever ago, and...
Everything about this episode bums me out, Jackson.
I know. But two things dated it to me. So we're doing a very, very early episode. So heads up, it's a rough one in my opinion. Don't think it's our worst one, but it's definitely rough. But two things.
It sounds bad. Again, names and pronouns are all wrong,
Yes.
and you can hear the army of birds that live right outside my window. The entire podcast. They're out there right now. I have a better mic now, so you can't hear them. I hear them right now, though. They're still out there. They have not gone away. I have an army of birds living right outside my window.
I mean, it's probably a bunch of different birds. The original birds are probably dead.
4 years. Yeah, you're probably right. But my dad keeps feeding the birds, so we have infinite birds that live in a tree that's right outside my window.
Oh, yeah, well, there you go. But you never hear them. Good microphone.
Yep. Yeah, no, get a good microphone, learn how to process your audio. The birds go away.
So there are two things that date this episode to me in very different ways.
Only 2?
You'll understand when I say what they are.
Okay.
The first one being that we opened with a joke about what is video game, and my sarcastic answer is World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and Halo.
What's Halo, Jackson?
I don't know. Which, now I think about it, this episode was December 2013. That was 5 years out of date then.
I mean, I think that's the reason you made the joke, but now it just feels ancient.
Yes.
Like, even the joke feels super hacked.
Yeah, no, because I would have known that. And the other thing is that exists alongside the PS4 coming out.
I got a PS4. I was saying I got a PS4, and you wouldn't want to buy one if you wanted new games. At this point, I had probably already bought and played 3 hours of Need for Speed Rivals and then never booted it again and just deleted it. That's $60 I just pissed away.
Yeah,
I'm still mad about it. I'm madder about it now when I'm more broke than I was in 2013. It fucking sucks.
You spent $60 and multiple hours of your time purchasing, installing, playing, and streaming Need for Speed Rivals.
And then I never touched it again.
Because it's garbage!
Yep.
Oh, mistakes were made.
Yep. Back when I could just buy a video game. I don't fucking know what that world is anymore.
I don't know. It was a different time.
Yep.
And this podcast, some of the weird failings of this podcast validate a lot about what we do with abnormal mapping and what we want to do with it. I feel like it is. What?
I, in particular, spend 20 minutes waffling, unable to just talk about the fact that the new Pokemon game that just came out is actually bad.
I know!
It's bad. It's bad. X and Y are bad games. I have played Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon are much better games. This is why we don't cover new games, because you bought the new game, you've just come off of, you bought the game for $40 or whatever, you spent 60 hours in it, and now you have to tell someone if it's good or bad, and it's just hard to make those calls when a thing is new.
Especially as we framed the whole conversation, because we cover Pokemon, and we framed the whole conversation as you, a person who enjoys Pokemon, that is your canon position, at this outside of the argument, having to defend it to me, the newcomer who doesn't understand Pokemon. And so I'm throwing all these why is this like this? And you're like, well, it's this, and then and these tensions throw back at each other when the answer is just it's a bad game. There are other better Pokemon games.
There are other better Pokemon games. Also, the framework by which we approach new things for the first time has changed so radically for both of us.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
We are so much more games people back in the day.
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, my argument about the swapper is fucking ludonarrative dissonance, basically.
And then so's mine, and then I'm like, oh, right, I guess there is. So I'm like, oh, the swapper's great, it has these things, and it's just a cool platformer, and it's cool. And then we spend 20 minutes debating whether the mechanics of, creating copies of yourself and swapping between them coheres with a narrative about an individual, and we're like, oh, this isn't truly coherent, it must be flawed in some way. What a stupid fucking...
So thinking about it, listening to this episode and considering my argument, I think the crux of my argument that I tried to dress up, and it's still kind of a thing I grapple with, is is the bullshit of the puzzles worth seeing through to get to the story? And in the swapper, I guess technically it is, but I feel that way about games all the fucking time. Do I want to play the video game, or do I just want to like look up on YouTube what it's about?
Well, I think the thing with the swapper that we would probably both say now is that it doesn't connect that much, but the story stuff's cool, and also the puzzle stuffs are cool, and I enjoy doing both of them. Like, the fact that they don't truly form a perfect whole of gameplay and story wouldn't be like imagine caring about that.
I wish I could skip some of the more annoying puzzles.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yes, our patience for this stuff has definitely changed.
Yeah, no, any video game that wastes my time more than like an hour, I'm already like throwing in the garbage. Never again.
There's another thing that stuck out to me. I probably didn't stuck out to you. Is there's a moment very early in this episode where you're talking about Resogun, and you say, "Oh, it's like Defender," and I go, "I'm a child. What's Defender?" And now I've played a bunch. I play like NES games all the time because I just emulate them. I've done a bunch of video series. I've caught up on stuff. Like the goal of this podcast as a place in which you can like play and explore games from just whenever and honestly appreciate them on their own terms without having to dress it up and this is what we did when we were kids, has been borne out through just me the last 4 years because I didn't know shit.
Yeah. I mean, I've also had this experience just entirely around PC games. Like I regularly go and play adventure games that are considered too old and too clunky for people to engage with for the first time. And I have a pretty good time with it. Like I do that every 3 times a week right now.
Yeah, no, how is Gabriel Knight?
Gabriel Knight's fucking fantastic.
I know. Well, but the Pokemon stuff is it's because you didn't go back and listen to this one for a while because like it was known as the moment I stopped to like talk you out from liking Pokemon because that's also turned out to be bullshit. Yeah, no, like both the like conversation and also the way we interpreted what it was were too heavily read into, and it's a bad game. Like it's not that deep. This is not that good a video game. It doesn't necessarily reflect on the greater failings of Pokemon as an idea, or I say the Pokemon might not last a decade.
That might be the actual dumbest thing you've ever said on a podcast.
We're almost halfway.
Yeah, no. The fact that you are surprised, this is before the Digi-Renaissance.
It is before the Digi-Renaissance, isn't it? There have been 3 Digimon RPGs in 3 years.
Yeah, Digimon, there was that new series that is movies, right?
Well, there's the movie series, but there's also the new series of that ended recently called Digimon Apply Monsters, and I'm being told to shut the fuck up as soon as possible.
No, I just, the idea that anything like Pokemon would go away is hilarious to me. It was hilarious then, it's extra hilarious now.
Oh, it's such a stupid thing. I did not realize how long a decade, or how short a decade was.
Yeah, no, you were much younger back then.
Oh, what
10 years, of course it's gonna be dead by then.
All video games things die after 10 years. It's fucking, like, they're still making Metal Slug games.
I don't think they've made a Metal Slug game in a long time.
They're still porting Metal Slug games.
Oh, sure. Metal Slug will come out on everything, but I don't think they've made a new Metal Slug since... I think there's a DS one that's new.
Okay, but my point is that things don't get forgotten, and one of them's Pokemon. What an idiot thing to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, using Metal Slug here is stupid. You might as well say, oh, is there going to be a new Madden? Like, come on.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's no... I mean, what if EA just explodes?
Okay, that might kill it. 2K will make football then.
Yeah, there'll be fake Madden. I always remember also the moment, the one moment that sticks out in my memory of me like laughing at Pokemon logic of you going up to a kid who is like, oh, I'm a kid. I've got, hey, do you want to fight the Pokemon with me? I'm a kid. We're Pokemon trainers. Blah, 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 let's do it. And then you throw your Pokeball and bring out a god that's been hidden for 1,000 years and own this child. I still think that's hilarious. That is like my overriding memory of Pokemon Y is that happening after I got...
I mean, that's just you understand Pokemon better now. You haven't really played much more, but you've watched a bunch and you've lived in this game hellscape forever.
I've watched a bunch. I played like a little bit of Red. I played about 15 hours of it, but didn't get very far for 15 hours. You're like, oh.
Yeah, no, you really didn't. I had no idea how you could possibly play that long and get as far as you did. I would have beaten that game by then.
Look, Red is. I was like, I'm gonna go play Fire Red, and like that'll be my introduction to Pokemon. Like that's the old classic game. I should be familiar with that one. It's really grind heavy. Should probably just play Sun and Moon.
Sun and Moon's a really good game. It does the things X, Y, and does, but it doesn't care about being a Pokemon game as like stridently as that game does. So because the spaces are way smaller and it just leans more into being like a narrative based RPG that just happens to be about like Pokemon.
Yep. Yeah. No. Pacing of X, Y is bad. It's a bad game. No, it's a bad game. It's really bad. The only good thing about Pokemon Y is the Nuzlocke run that Griffin did.
Yeah, it's maybe the only Griffin content I enjoy in the world, but you can go watch him play Pokemon X, Y, and it's great. It's very funny.
It is very, very rare of us to endorse McElroy content.
Yeah, but I will endorse that Nuzlocke run. It's
so
good.
Know how serious we are about that Nuzlocke run.
That's it. We're done. Listen to the episode.
See how far we've come.
Jackson.
Yes.
Where can people find us? That's not the new Twitter account that we introduced in this episode, because while that Twitter account still exists, we never fucking use it.
The Abnormal Mapping account. I use that. It's got like 106 followers now. It's
I know, but it's basically like our announcement that a thing is up.
It is basically our RSS feed.
Yeah.
Nor is our Tumblr up.
No, that Tumblr went away because Tumblr is a bad platform. I'm amazed Tumblr still exists. Will Tumblr be around in 10 years? You want to take that bet?
Probably.
I don't think it will be.
If it was gonna die, it'd died. Like it's just gonna be fucking LiveJournal.
I don't know. That's not true. AIM existed till now. Who would have thought that would happen?
I didn't think there was a strong possibility that we could have been using AIM as our primary text chat.
I know.
God damn. Right. You can find me at Headfuls Off on Twitter. You can find our other shows at abnormalmapping.com. We have a bunch. We have the Star Trek podcast, Second Officer Slog. We read Star Trek books, and we're also doing weekly podcasts about Star Trek Discovery, the current ongoing show. It's great. If you have a passing interest in Star Trek, you should at least check the discussions of the episodes out. Don't listen to the DS9 book stuff because it's very spoilery, and you should watch more Star Trek before you listen to those. But we do have some beginner-friendly podcasts coming up in the next 4 months. We've got a good schedule, so it's a very good show. I'm very proud of it. You should listen to it. It is at StarTrekPodcast.space. I do the Amory Score with Molly. It is a podcast where we listen to and read the lore of Coheed and Cambria. It's very dumb. Mayo Defton Wolf is a hero. Come find out why at ineedmayo.com. We do The Great Gundam Project, which is a show where we watch 2 episodes of Gundam every week. And it is a Patreon exclusive show that you can get if you subscribe for $1 a month or more, which is very cheap and very reasonable. We can only do this podcast with your support. It is at patreon.com/abnormalmapping. Please help. Please help. We're very busy.
And very poor.
And very, very poor.
You can find me at emo_being. You can find our videos, including videos of these podcasts, on YouTube at youtube.com/abnormalmapping. Check that out. Like and subscribe. All the things. Listen to the rest of this podcast. We'll be back with a real episode about Final Fantasy X in 2 weeks. Be hype for Final Fantasy. Hey, Jackson, answer me this. What is game?
Tetris.
That's not an answer.
Okay. Game is the Call of Duties, the World of Warcraft, and Halo.
Is that all the video game?
Those are the video game.
Well, this podcast should be easy then. Hello and welcome to Abnormal Mapping, Episode 2. I'm your host, Matthew Marco, and with me is co-host Jackson Tyler.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about video games and the PlayStation 4.
What is a PlayStation 4?
It's a video game console. It came out
Oh, that's interesting. When did that happen? When did the future arrive?
The future arrived, as of this recording, about 3 days ago.
Okay. Is it good? Is it a good? What would you give it as a score?
You can put games in it. You probably don't want to, because there's nothing to put in it that's good that you can't get elsewhere. But that Resogun's neat.
I saw you playing a bit of that for like 2 seconds. What is that game? Is it good?
It's Defender.
It's Defender. I'm a child. What is
Okay,
Defender?
so like Defender is this horizontal shooter. You know what a horizontal shooter is, right?
I do know what a horizontal shooter is.
Okay, and the idea is that the screen loops. So you start and you go, and eventually you'll come back around to where you were, even if you don't change direction. And there are little astronaut guys you have to pick up and take to safe zones while you're fighting all the enemies, because the enemies want to destroy the guys and you want to save them. And it's like that, except instead of just a scrolling level that wraps around, it's an actual cylinder, and inside the cylinder is a weird voxel city that blows up as you shoot stuff, and it's full of lights and noise. It's, like Geometry Wars was kind of like a weird remake of old arcade games. Same with Super Stardust. That's like what Resogun is. It's cool.
What does Resogun mean? What is the Resogun?
I don't know. If you believe Vinny Caravella, it's a thing inside a TV that shoots resolution lines.
It literally is a resolution gun. Or is that Vinny being dumb?
Like in a CRT, I wouldn't be surprised if the thing that like drew the lines on the screen is called a Resogun. That seems dumb enough to be true. Just like how microwaves have a thing called a magnetron in it, and that just sounds like it's a space laser.
You're right. That is pretty ridiculous. Like magnetron is, the thing in Star Trek, right?
I guess. Like if you hook it up to the deflector array, you can go back in time.
Yeah. It emits chronoparticles or whatever.
We're not going to talk about the PlayStation 4. You know why? Because we do not cover news.
We don't.
But I have one.
Okay. Breaking news.
It's not breaking news. The only reason that's important is because sometimes I hit that share button and select stream, and then I let people watch me play games poorly on the internet, which you can do, and anyone listening can do by following my our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/abnormalmapping. So that's news, but podcast specific.
It's not breaking news of the actual kind.
I mean, if you don't follow us on Twitter and are listening to this because you stumbled down a weird internet hole, maybe it's breaking news to you.
Well, also welcome to this internet hole. Glad to see you're still here.
You'll never escape.
You'll never escape.
So yeah, I mean, we've got that going for us. We've got the Tumblr going, right? We're going to put bios on there, because I said we were last episode, and then we've had a busy month, both of us.
Yeah, we're going to put bios, and we're going to, if you put the Skype conversation we had.
Yeah, there might be secret text podcasts that arrive unfiltered.
It just kind of gives you an idea of if anything can go up there if we think it's relevant. Just, if we got stuff to say, it'll go up there in some form or another. I
mean, I wouldn't say that we had a whole lot to say, but it's a good example of why we started this podcast, because we were doing that all the time, and we were like, why aren't we recording this? This would be way better if people could listen to it.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, other breaking news. I wish I had a news stinger, but I'm not going to find one on the royalty-free site for this.
It's the Terminator news stinger.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. We've also got a Twitter account for Abnormal Mapping itself. It's at Abnormal Mapping. And we have an email too, right?
We do?
It's abnormalmappingpodcast@gmail.com. I think that's right.
Yes, that's right, because we couldn't have... Oh, yes, I remember now.
Because I was going to make questions.abnormalmapping@gmail.com or whatever.
It was questions@abnormalmapping.com@gmail.com.
Which was too long. And then when I tried to use punctuation to do that, it sent everyone's computers into the weird recursive email loop that would crash your browser. It did that to me too. So that was a dumb idea.
It's 2013. They still haven't worked that out.
Gmail said you could use periods, so I did. They didn't tell me what would happen if I did.
No, unforeseen consequences.
So that's a thing, though. We're going to ask questions on Twitter too. If you follow Abnormal Mapping on Twitter, you will get up to the minute we posted a thing on Tumblr or someone's streaming a video game. I don't think we're going to use it for much more than that. So, because RSS feeds are dead, use that.
Yeah, pretty much. The emails for if you really need to send us something longer, then sure. But just get in touch on any of the many ways, and that's cool.
Yep. Feel free to ask us questions. We'll address them at the end of any episode. We have questions this month. It's very exciting.
I'm excited. I don't even know what one of them is.
Oh, you didn't check our Tumblr ask box.
I should do that.
No, don't. Because
It'll
I'll
ruin the
ask you the
surprise.
question and I will want a serious answer because we will give even the dumbest questions considered answers.
Yep, he's right. Yep.
So, with that out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, were you about to say video games?
Yes.
Yeah, this is a podcast about video games. I meant specifically that we are going to talk about 2 video games. And those video games are The Swapper and Pokemon XY. So I guess 3 video games.
Yeah, 3 video games. Pokemon X, Pokemon Y, and The Swapper.
I hate everything we've done just now. This podcast is over.
I want to die. Segment 2, we're going to talk about The Swapper, which is a PC game that came out this year, puzzle game from Facepalm Games, which are 2 University of Helsinki students. Essentially it's a Braid-like game in which you are a 2D man that has to solve puzzles with a weird mechanic, as many games in the last 5 years have been. But it's a really, really, really good one of those. I liked it a lot. What did you think of it, Matt?
Yeah, I really like The Swapper a lot, since you didn't bother saying what the game is about in terms of theme.
Okay, well, that's how it's going to be.
The Swapper begins with you as a mysterious space-suited person who is jettisoned into space against their will and arrives on a planet to find a gun that allows you to create clones and swap to them. And you use that to get back on the space station, open doors, solve puzzles, and figure out why someone would dare to jettison you into the black void of space. Which makes it sound way more like a revenge tale. It's actually a really moody puzzle platformer, like you said.
Yep.
Considering your protagonist is silent and all of the story is very mysterious.
Yeah, it's essentially you find 3-word audio logs everywhere.
Well, you find...
No, I know. I'm saying that in terms of the way that they do it, it's you go across a location on the map and then some story comes in your face.
That's true. You go around. The game is kind of this weird claymation style thing. It looks like a lot of like photographed objects. I don't think it is, but it's definitely made to look.
It is. It's
okay.
They actually made the game in clay, and I don't know how, whether they painted over them or took photos, but that's how it gets the look it has. It looks great.
It looks really good. And then you run around and interact with computer terminals and talk to magic space rocks.
Yep.
All the Magic Space rocks.
Every single one. Yeah. No. Did you get all of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course you did.
Yeah. They are giant spongy rocks that speak to you through weird shaky telepathy.
Yep.
So, I suppose the thing that is worth talking about is... Well, actually, I want to pose a question to you.
Okay.
The Swapper is this story about trying to figure out what happened and the mysteries of these rocks and what it means to, like, the game deals with identity and cloning and the soul, because your gun supposedly transfers your soul into these clones, and then you carry on. But the game is really about standing on switches to open doors. Do you think that's an incongruous thing? Because I've been thinking about this a lot. Where the story is like this, like, very, like, heady philosophical thing, and the game is literally, I went to a hub and there's 4 branches and each branch has a puzzle, and then I do the puzzles and then I get to open the big door to the next area with a new hub. And the two don't really connect that much.
They connect a little bit I think there's something about the fact that although it is, yes, here's a game with a bunch of puzzles that you have to do, like many, many, many other games with a bunch of puzzles that you have to do, and story is layered on top of that. There is something about the fact that it is designed so it is impossible to get through without using the swapper. I think the fact that they chose to make the central mechanic one you couldn't ignore in the way the story goes, I don't know. That is a hard question.
Because the reason I ask is because I've been seeing a lot of reticence in certain critical circles about the default mode for indie games being this puzzle platformer, and oftentimes that might not be appropriate to the actual theme. And I wonder if the swapper is necessarily vital, because all of the door stuff is totally gamey stuff, gating put on top of the mechanics. That said, yeah, the actual usage of shooting, like creating clones and transferring yourself to them in order to traverse and stuff, gives you time to experience this thing over and over to where it becomes this, I think it's totally normal that to ascend a vertical shaft, I'm basically shooting copies of myself into the air and watching the previous ones fall to their deaths over and over again. Because that is maybe the game's best mechanic of how you survive long falls or climb shafts, is just form one of you above or below you and then swap to it before you hit the ground.
It's so good.
It's really upsetting. Because you'll, like, if you're descending a vertical shaft, you'll do one right at the floor and then swap to it. And then as you take control of that new person, there'll just be a body lying at your feet. Or several bodies lying at your feet.
Which is generally the way it goes. I think it's an obstacle. It's essentially an obstacle course created to force you to use the central mechanic as much as possible in order to raise the questions it wants to raise. I don't think that necessarily the gameplay that it has is the one it needed to be to get to those questions, to get to the whole things about the soul and, 101 philosophy of teleporters. Basically, it's the thing that everyone thinks about when you watch Star Trek, of is the guy on the surface the same guy as the guy who actually went in the teleporter. It's pretty much what it is, right? And at least it was to me. Was that the same thing?
The game definitely focuses on that idea of what identity is, and what, like, you create these copies, and then your other option is to transfer your soul into it, but because they are identical copies of you, who's to say which one is the one that matters? Like, which one is the real you at some point?
Yeah.
Is there a soul that's being transferred, like the prime copy of protagonist is the one that played through the entire game, or is it just the 1000th copy that makes it through the game, like the final part of the game, leaving a wake of prior copies, like dead, lying around the space station, or absorbed into nothingness because when you touch a clone of yourself, you basically devour it like amoebas. And the game outright like deals with those things through the scientist logs and the space rocks.
Totally.
The space rocks seem totally unconvinced of an idea of a soul because they're a weird, like amorphous hive mind kind of thing.
Yeah, they have a completely different way of thinking about things than you and the other human in the game.
Yep. It's just the two humans and the prophets.
Pretty much. I think that in terms of the way the mechanics work and the way that the questions the game is trying to work, the biggest conflict is who the player, as in the observer who's deciding which one is in charge. That doesn't line up properly. You don't. For a game about identity and who you're controlling, you don't know who you are as the player. I don't know. I think there's a weird fourth wall thing there.
Well, you're whichever one is the game is focusing on, like the camera's focusing on.
No, I know that, but it never. The story doesn't seem to. I don't know. The story makes less sense when you think about the fact that you, as the player, have been controlling them the whole time. Like, how are all the clones following one? Following, like, mimicking the movements of one other clone, of the prime clone at the time. How are they doing that?
But
if they're
it
all
doesn't.
sentient?
It doesn't matter. Like when you have 4 clones running in tandem, it doesn't matter which one the player is controlling / which one the camera is focused on. The result is actually the same no matter what.
The result is the same, but it does matter because you're only in charge of one, and you can only.
Like the only way that breaks is which one gets to pick up the orb. Like that's the only thing where I think that your incongruity exists. But for stuff like standing on switches and running around and getting through the puzzles themselves, which one you are doesn't matter because the results are always the same. Like if you could like break the game and see the perspectives of all of the clones at the same time, nothing would seem outside the realm of the mechanics you're presented with.
Okay. That makes sense, yeah.
Except for that instance where you have to be the one that the camera's centered on to pick up the orbs, which open the gates to the new areas. Which is why I asked if the weird gating in that game is maybe incongruous gaminess.
It definitely is to an extent, I think, because they are making Indie Game 101 and layering this interesting stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
It's
because at the end of the day, the puzzles are neat, but making clones of yourself and manipulating them to open doors is PG Winterbottom and Braid and a bunch of other different games.
Yeah. No, I got nothing to rebut that.
But I think the interesting thing there is that the theme is so strong.
The theme is super strong, and the theme is carried. The theme is carried through the central mechanic, even if the actual design around that is very boilerplate. And then when you get to that final moment of the final choice and everything's been revealed, it still works to an extent.
Yeah, and there are moments where even like those mechanics, like as much as we are breaking this down into mechanics and theme, the actual game feels relatively cohesive in that the environments you're exploring and the puzzles you're dealing with all feel like they are part of this whole like giant space station labyrinth thing. Mm-hmm. Which I bring up mostly to talk about the weird 0G stuff, which is some of my favorite, but has nothing to do with the story or the mechanics.
No, it just comes out of nowhere and you start clicking to do 0G. Even though there was no indication when you were swapping that thing firing that thing created actual force.
Yeah. So there are like 3 parts in the game where you go through 0G or even just outright empty space. And usually the game gets very quiet at those moments and there's a lot of stuff floating around and you can't move because you can't like attach to anything until you figure out that your alternate fire of the swap gun, the one that normally transfers your soul to the other clone, actually creates force that will propel you through these areas. So you kind of fly around shooting your soul. I don't know. When you think about how that might actually happen, that you're like shooting consciousness out and it's not connecting to anything, it's kind of upsetting.
That is definitely pretty. But the game's not the most coherent game in the world. It just has the strong parts.
Oh yeah,
Carry
the mechanics of the swapper gun are a philosophical exercise more than they are a scientifically sound one.
Most definitely. And also the puzzle game is good, as much as it doesn't make all that sense.
Maybe it's not particularly unique, but like I will say that like I compared it to other games, I felt like the puzzles were much more achievable than like the PJ Winterbottom ones, which are that game is crazy hard in like an unreasonable way, I feel like. And a lot of it with the swapper is that you can only create such a limited number of clones, and the puzzle rooms are so restricted. Like there's not like it is clear how you need to achieve it. You just kind of have to figure out the steps to do the thing you need to do to get to your goal.
Yeah, you never lose sight of the next thing you need to do. At least on a basic. Sometimes you can get confused, but it's not like you can go, "Oh, I've got no clue how to do it," because you can see the orb. And generally, you can. There's a small number of variables in each puzzle, so you can keep track of it.
So I suppose we should talk about the reveals at the ending then.
Were they really reveals though? Because it couldn't have gone any other way. I mean, there were reveals, but it couldn't have gone any other way.
I feel like I was not expecting what happened when you met up with the other person. Maybe I should have.
Which part specifically?
Okay, so you're chasing like this other like doctor scientist, ostensibly the one who shot you into space at the beginning.
Yep.
And she's obviously crazy, and you find out that she's maybe like come into contact with other life forms and use the swapper to like blend her consciousness with them, and it's driven her mad. But when you finally confront her, you run up to her, and then you absorb her into your body, like every other one of the clones, revealing that you are just another clone of her.
Yeah.
But because your protagonist is silent, your character, like you, the player, is never given enough information to put that together, other than maybe I read a lot of sci-fi, and of course. But I was surprised by it.
I guess, but in a game about clones, and there's two characters that are both in spacesuits, they are clearly going to be the same character. I mean, but yeah, I also thought you didn't know if you were referring to the fact that all the clones are technically alive.
Well, sure. I feel like that's a given.
That's what
the
I meant.
Thousands of people that you've created of yourself, you've murdered all of them.
Well, no, but I was like, was anyone expecting that at some point in this game we're going to answer, yes, there is a soul, everything is fine, you are you and have made it through to the end. Because that was never going to happen in a million years.
No, it's the bleakest game because you've died infinite times.
Yep.
And you just, because you've been replicating yourself before you die, you don't realize it.
No, yeah, exactly.
But the existence of the two long-standing clones enough to come into contact and conflict story-wise, I thought was surprising. I was not you're right. Like, in retrospect, I totally should have seen it, but I didn't.
That's fair enough. Yeah, because the atmosphere is so... Also, the mystery that it presents is not that mystery. The mystery is never who is the girl.
Yeah, it's about what is the nature of this swapping and what are the crazy statues that are talking to you.
Yeah, so when you come into contact with the girl, it's like, oh wait, they went in this direction, which they didn't even set up earlier. I mean, they did, but didn't focus your attention on it and thus telegraph it.
So at the end, after you've murdered yourself infinite times in your bid to survive, and realize that the nature of the swapper isn't that it's transferring your soul, but just creating copies, and there is no such thing. It's weird. I'm conflicted because like it does that, but then obviously there is a transference that happens.
There is.
Because of how the ending works and how like the other you that is the antagonist blended her consciousness by swapping with these things that weren't her.
Yep, and also the choice at the end where you can go into the other. That's why it wasn't clear, because it is transferring consciousness.
I suppose the difference is if you're transferring consciousness to a recently created clone of yourself, there's no way to know. Because there's no blending there, because both, like, in that moment, both parties' experiences are exactly the same. It's like laying two identical transparencies on top of each other. There's no way, like, there's no noticeable difference.
Yeah, so essentially it is a swapper, but it just doesn't erase the one that it left, essentially.
Yeah.
It just creates a copy. Yeah.
So at the very end of the game, you're given the choice to continue to be a monster and fight for your survival or not when the rescue team arrives on this planet, but they realize that what the swapper is, and that all of these, like, this mechanic is happening, and that there's these other consciousnesses and they can't trust you. And so they're like, we're going to leave the planet. And you're given the option to swap to the rescue guy or not.
Yeah, everyone should choose to swap. Oh, not should, but everyone. Come on. I don't know why you choose to not survive in that instance. I just think it works better for the game.
Sure. I mean, the game thematically is about the desire for an individual to survive will like supersede even like paradox and like metaphysical questions. So why wouldn't you just obliterate rescue guy in order to save yourself?
Yeah,
you know.
But also the whole premise of the game is the desire to survive is what's killing yourself over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because you are using the swapper to survive and progress, but by using the swapper, you are also dying a bunch.
So yeah, be a monster. Don't sacrifice yourself. Why would you ever do that?
I don't know! Because it's the good choice, but there's no good choice that
I like that this game sets up a weird moral choice where one of them is obviously a cop-out answer, and it's the good one, because that almost is never the case in video games.
No, it is normally, do the good thing, or just be evil for no reason. Whereas in this case, you have just been being evil the whole time and not realizing it.
So, the Swapper is a good game, you would say.
It is. I'm less sure now, because
I brought up all of these doubts.
You brought up all these doubts, yeah. Because
I think that it can be mechanically inconsistent, but still really interesting.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that the question's it. I don't think any other game has attempted to deal with that specific philosophical question as well as this one, even though there's a bunch of flaws.
Mm-hmm. And as the first game by like 2 students, I think it's pretty damn impressive.
Totally, especially with how great it looks and the style of it and the whole thing about them making clay models of the whole thing.
Yeah, great tone. Very bleak 70s sci-fi.
Great sound design. Just listen to that space noise.
Yep. Absolutely. So people should play the Swapper.
You should.
Not that we're not reviewing games here, but if we were, I would give it 3 hats.
Out of
a sandwich.
Cool. It's a good score.
Yeah.
Not many 3 hats going these days.
I mean, you know, you can't break out the 3 hats for just anybody.
No. And rarely ever do we get a full sandwich.
No.
No, we're cutting this joke out.
An open-faced one at best. Which, as we all know, might as well just be a taco.
I thought this game was going to be a full sandwich. It was just one of those folded over piece of bread with ham in the middle.
Oh, that's upsetting.
I know.
So for our third segment, we're going to talk about Pokemon X and Y, which are new games, even though I said we weren't going to talk about new games on this podcast, but we were playing it, and are the 6th generation of mainline Pokemon titles developed by Game Freak, published by Nintendo for your portable consoles of choice, in this case the 3DS. what I think we're going to end up doing is just having a discussion about it, because I come from this as someone who got Red and Blue the day they came out in America and have been a fan ever since. And Jackson, this is your first rope-a-dope with the Pokemons.
Yeah, no, it's my first Pokemon game.
And I think instead of just breaking down mechanics and being critical in that way, like we would probably normally do, more interesting is me trying to justify all the weird things about Pokemon to someone who doesn't know. Because Pokemon's kind of weird, and this one in particular is even weirder because the move to 3D made things kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, what are your feelings about, now that we've tried not to talk about it, though I kind of know some of your opinions.
Yeah.
Now that you've gone through a Pokemon journey, are some sort of Pokemon, maybe not a master, but a devotee, an acolyte, I don't know what word you'd choose. How do you feel about Pokemon?
It's so weird. Like, I know Pokemon's weird and everyone talking about Pokemon being weird, but it's really weird. Like, coming at it from someone who decided deliberately to not look stuff up, to not go talk to people much about how to battle Pokemon, for example. The game is abjectly appalling at presenting you with information. I don't know what type half of the monsters I was fighting were. I didn't know what types they were weak to. Like, apparently Fairy is weak to Bug.
Yeah, you should... Like, the thing that you need to play Pokemon is, the only thing I think you actually need is the type chart, which is usually in the guide, like the manual, which we both downloaded this, right? So, I mean, it's probably in the digital manual. It's just a giant spreadsheet, like, comparison chart thing.
Yeah.
Without that, Pokemon might as well be the most opaque system in the world.
Yeah!
And the thing is, because there was, 15 types in the first gen, and then they added Steel and Dark in second gen, and then they've added Fairy in this gen. So it's been a pretty static group of typings. So I have almost that entire spreadsheet just in my brain forever, because I've played multiple games where that's been a thing. So you tell me something looks ice, I'm like, oh, I should probably bring out a fire thing. I should probably hit it with fighting, because I know they're weak to that.
Yeah, well, that's just standard elemental JRPG combat, which works well. Like, oh, it's a grass Pokemon, I'm going to burn it. Or, oh, it's water, I'll use ground or whatever it is. But it's where they get into their, Fairy and Bug and...
It's a fighting type, I should use flying against it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, that one. Even though one of my fighting abilities was really strong against air, and what? And,
to counter that, because because there are moves that will counter type weaknesses or be specifically built around exploiting common reversals.
But the game, and all those systems are there, and I can tell they're there. That's what's frustrating about it, is that I'm playing the game, I know that all this is there, but it's just so hard to discover it, and there's no fun in discovering it, so I probably should have gone online and looked it up and primed myself first. But I wanted the experience of going around this crazy world and finding things out. But
I think the problem with Pokemon in particular, and this game especially, is that after so much time, there's so much assumed knowledge.
Yeah.
That a lot of the systems are never explained. Like, they will teach you how to catch a Pokemon, and that's as far as it goes. And they barely do that.
Pretty much.
And it's not like you're missing, the NPC who will tell you how the game works. There's a school that will explain what the status effects are, in the second town, stuff like that. But outside of that, there's really nothing there, because everybody's played Pokemon.
Which is fine on one level, if you're going to have this opaque system which you can poke at and learn how it works. I actually I'm for that. I think they can do a bunch better with it. I don't think that it's not very effective or it's super effective are good ways of conveying information. But
the thing is, everybody, at this point, everyone knows that not very effective is half damage and super effective is 2 times damage or 4 times damage if you're exploiting both weaknesses.
But I don't. So
Yeah, no,
thanks
the
for
thing
telling
is
me
the
that.
game doesn't serve... Like, the thing about Pokemon is that on one level, it is a kid-friendly RPG where as long as you, like, fight everybody and are not like, as long as you exploit the elemental weaknesses using the chart, which is in the guide, which is in the book, you can get past it. The other Pokemon is a weird math game where every number isn't surfaced.
And that's my central problem with it. Is that I could tell the other Pokemon was there, but it was so busy giving me all these things that are giving me roller skates, giving me like on this the most linear story-driven RPG possible. Like you go to this town, you go to this town, you fight this guy, this guy, this guy. So the game design completely prevented me from getting into the other Pokemon because it was it didn't encourage experimentation at all. In fact, it actively restricted you at every corner. I don't understand that choice. I don't understand why you'd make a game that ridiculous in terms of systems and then try your best to never acknowledge they exist.
I think that the problem is the main story of Pokemon is not really about the plot. You're going around the gyms and collecting badges to get to the Elite Four. But all that basically does is gate you into diversifying your team over time. Because you get a Pokemon you like, and then it works for one gym, but then the next gym, it obviously doesn't at all. And then, so you have to find something new to put in your team. And then the next Pokemon, same thing, the next gym, the same thing happens, so you have to add new things. And eventually, like, ideally, it gives you a team that has a wide range of types, which is the thing you need is type coverage in any team. Like in the little kid Pokemon or the like crazy math Pokemon, type coverage is key. But yeah, if you're playing this like expecting a story, the thing that
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm saying
I think the charm that people find in Pokemon is a lot like Dragon Quest in that it's not in the broad picture, but in the Dragon Quest is a little more narrative driven, but it's in the moment-to-moment interactions with characters, because the NPCs in Pokemon are weird in a very goofy Nintendo way. But and I draw this comparison for multiple reasons, because the way Dragon Quest works is there's an overarching story, but it's kind of stupid. But then each town you go into kind of has like a mini story and a dungeon and a boss wrapped up around it. Like you go into a town that the mines are haunted, you have to go in and clean that out. Or you go into a town where like their totem has been stolen and you have to go and find that. And like each one of those is like a little vignette in the broader picture that has more flavor and is a little more intimate than the broad overarching thing. And Pokemon has that, but almost on like an NPC by NPC level, where it's like, oh, here's the kid who likes his shorts, and here's the guy who spouts that Reggie meme, and it is very weird. But just like Dragon Quest, the thing that makes it popular is that the people who like it I enjoy the comfort of nestling back into that world where they kind of know how everything's going to go. I think unless you're hit by fatigue, which happens, the pleasure of Pokemon is that one of them only comes out like every 3 years, and you're probably ready for a new one if you're that person when it comes out.
But I don't think it's this. I don't have any problem with the story. I just have a problem with the structure being really linear and saying you will fight these Pokemon, then you will fight these Pokemon, then you will fight these Pokemon, which I feel like, yes, it does gate you into having a varied party by the end, but it also means you're going to have the same kind of varied party by the end. It means that any of it like if Pokemon was designed as a kind of game that you would start, I don't mean random on any level, but I mean I kind of do. I mean, like, if you started and you didn't know what the next town was going to be, or you didn't know what Pokemon were going to be around you, you didn't know what starter you would have, I feel like that would make the activities of poking at this opaque system far more rewarding.
I'm yes and no. I think starters, you have to have the starters because the way that they gain moves is radically different than other Pokemon. They are built to be the one you start with and keep with you the entire game. Because, like, I caught one of those Ghost Blades, and that guy didn't learn moves for, like, 10 levels, where I was just kind of nursing him along until he got better.
Oh, no, I don't think
like, you can't start the game with every Pokemon.
No, I don't think you should. I mean, like, you're always going to have the same 3 starters. You're always going to have the same starting town. You're always going to catch a Pikachu in that first little forest.
So, I mean, your complaint is that traditional Japanese RPG is traditional.
Pretty, but it's traditional RPG is traditional, and yet it is bad at being it's bad at the higher level story stuff. It's bad at making you feel attached to the characters, and it's bad at all the things that traditionally a narrative linear RPG that is rewarding about that. Now, there's things it's good at are this crazy system.
Yeah.
That it just doesn't mesh to me at all. I mean,
so one of the things that because I knew that you were not super into Pokemon going into this, so I was trying to think about why your complaints happened, because I've always thought of Pokemon as like a pretty like high level RPG in a lot of ways. And I think the thing is, like, the framework of what you do, the 8 badges and then the Elite Four, hasn't changed since the Game Boy. And that framework and story on the Game Boy was radical. Like, there was no game like that was that big, that had a world that you would travel like that you would encounter so many people and such like a diverse amount of stuff.
Yeah.
The original Game Boy Pokemon games were just the craziest things in the world. And because it is what it is, like that framework hasn't evolved, and I think portable games as like a representative group have just grown up a lot, whereas Pokemon has added more systems but is relatively the same thing. Mm-hmm. But when you compare like the original Pokemon, which is identifiably similar to Pokemon XY, versus like Super Mario 3D Land versus Super Mario Land, like the gulf between those things is so different.
Yeah.
Which isn't me making excuses for Pokemon.
No.
It is just like why I've not noticed the problems that you point out. Mm-hmm. Because I remember when Pokemon on the Game Boy was crazy, because it was Tetris and then Pokemon. And it's like, how do you reconcile the two things on the same like thing that you carry in your pocket?
But also, playing that for the first time, the internet, one, probably didn't exist as big as it did, and two, everyone knows about Pokemon. I still know about Pokemon. I know what its deal is, so there's no inherent discovery.
Oh, that's also
through
true.
The world, which there is in the first time you do it, and because I know about what Pokemon is, them sticking to the same formula, even someone who's never played it, removes all of the benefits of, this is crazy and all this craziness. It's instead just, even for the first time, it still felt like going through the motions, which is a really odd way to feel for a debut.
You were right. Like, I understand, because I can see that. I felt that way about series before. Not necessarily this one, because I like Pokemon, but yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to bring up, because you talk about how the story evolves the same way, is for that other Pokemon, the mathy Pokemon.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a bit of a tangent, so just bear with me, because I want to try to explain what competitive Pokemon is.
Okay.
Because 4th gen, Diamond Pearl, I got deep into that, which was a sickness. I was unemployed is my excuse. Going through up to beating the Elite Four in most Pokemon games since the Game Boy Advance is the first half of the game. Like, there isn't narrative after that, but what unlocks afterwards is the real Pokemon, where you get the National Pokedex, and now you can catch all of the like 700 Pokemon, and the game opens up and exposes the high level stuff, because so each Pokemon is a character with stats, right? Like, they have their attack, special attack, the same thing for defense and speed and stuff like that. But then there's natures, which the game doesn't explain, which give you a plus or minus. Like, a Jolly Nature Pokemon has one stat is raised and one stat is lowered by like 30% over the course of their lifetime because of that nature. And there's like, I don't know, 20 natures, something like that. The game doesn't explain any of those. And then, so for playing with other players who have figured out these mechanics, they've been playing this game for 2 decades. First thing you have to do is get a Pokemon with the right nature, which is why breeding's important. But then there's also a hidden stat underneath each of those stats, like say attack. There's a hidden value between 1 and 31 called an initial value that's set when the Pokemon's born that changes how like high in the random number generator those stats can go up.
What?
Which will change, and there is like a character in the game where if you have a lead Pokemon with you and talk to them, they'll be like, oh, this Pokemon's good at attack. And that's basically telling, like surfacing, oh, its attack value is probably its highest hidden stat. There are ways in the game to reveal that if you know, but the game doesn't actually surface that's what they're about. This is the stuff for the metagame players. And then there's also effort values, which every time you kill a Pokemon, you're getting experience, right? But you're also getting a second hidden stat, which is like a experience modifier for your stat growth that's between... You can get a total of like 400 of them or so. It's been a while, so I don't remember. And so you kill like, a Zigzagoon, and you'll get 1 hit point hidden value. And once you get up to 400, it's over. That's the total amount you can have. But what they do is increase how much that stat goes up as you level up. It's another modifier on stat growth. And that's what the special training is. It actually allows you to do that without fighting Pokemon, because it used to be that if you wanted a Pokemon that had its points in hit points and attack, you'd have to go and fight only the monsters that gave you hit points and attack hidden XP over and over again, like hundreds of them, until you max that out, and then you could go level up normally. Which is the bizarre hidden numbers game of Pokemon, in that there are 3 separate unrevealed modifiers on Pokemon stats that, like, if you read a forum or a wiki, they're all exposed and the math is known, but the game doesn't tell you any of that. It's all just randomized, like, maybe this Pokemon's better than this one, I don't know. Which is... And then the thing that unlocks after the main game in most Pokemon is game challenges that are way harder. They're usually like in Emerald, it was the Battle Frontier, where you'd go and fight special trainers that had much more diverse teams at much higher levels. Okay. Or they'd normalize the levels at like 50 or 100. But all of those Pokemon, like the Pokemon the Elite Four don't have any of that modifiers touched. They're more like generic blank slate Pokemon. The ones at the end game, the special stuff, all that stuff has been set like a competitive player, like a human player. So to get to that end game involves that's where the 100 of hours of Pokemon come from. It's not the main game, it's the breeding and the training that come after that game, where you're fighting the opponents that have also done all of those things and have those modifiers manipulated. That is the dark hole of competitive Pokemon.
Okay, because that was the other area of Pokemon where I was getting burnt out, is the why of all of it. Like, yes, there are all these crazy systems and stuff I can tell there, and yes, I could try and catch them all.
For the actuals, like, you play through the gyms and fight the Elite Four storyline, none of that matters. That is all for metagame, like, endgame bonus stuff.
Well, exactly.
That's the thing I wanted to bring up specifically about Pokemon XY, because we haven't really talked about that specifically, is... because of the move to 3D and how it was obviously very hard to create like 700 models of Pokemon and create this fully 3D world. And it is obvious that the 3DS, as much of an improvement it is over the DS, can sometimes barely handle it.
With the split screen in the attack, in the battles, it's like 4 frames a second.
That end game, once you beat the Elite Four, at this point has just been reduced to like, here's an extra town with like 6 buildings, and here's a like endless field where you can catch Pokemon based on your friends you have on your friends list. It's a way smaller end game, and I feel like the problem with that isn't that it's not that it demands that you, like, Pokemon doesn't demand that you interact with those systems, but I feel like the contract of what you're getting out of a Pokemon game should be, it's a, 30-hour fun romp through Nostalgia Town, and then if you choose to accept it, the hundreds of hours nonsense. Oh, there's a whole other game here that unlocks after you beat the game, as you would traditionally define it, and that doesn't really exist in Pokemon XY. And I think that makes the the go through the 8 gyms and fight the Elite Four less valuable, because it's not setting you up for anything. And even compared to Black and White, I think that the path through all of those gyms and the towns and everything is just less interesting. The move to 3D really shrunk down the world that you're exploring.
Okay, because I thought the world was pretty small. Having not played a Pokemon game, it felt small. I don't know why it felt small. It just felt small.
No,
was it small, or was that just the feel?
It's always been you follow the routes and you get to the towns, and sometimes there's caves that you go through. But yeah, the general layout of a lot of the areas is just geographically is smaller than it normally is.
Okay.
It is just pure yardage size, a smaller game than most Pokemon games. And because of that, it feels like your quest is less significant, and a lot of it feels kind of half-baked. The Team Flare stuff wraps up around the 7th gym in, it seems like they shoved, the end Team Flare encounter, it seemed like they shoved, 3 separate story beats that were supposed to happen spaced throughout the game together because they ran out of game to put it in.
Yeah.
The team in Black and White, you fight all through the game, and then after you beat the Elite Four, there's a whole other extra dungeon thing where you fight all the team for the final time, and it's an extra thing you tackle. And the Team Flare stuff just felt super tacked on, and instead you get the story of Ancient King guy, which is basically
real dark. Out of nowhere.
But my problem is it's basically the anime tie-in movie shoved into the game. Because that kind of nonsense of ancient kings and mystical Pokemon is what every Pokemon movie is.
Yes,
is just a dumb offhand thing where you blunder into someone else's more interesting story and save the day, and then the world resets, and which is what happens with that story.
Actually, as a story, the Team Flare stuff was real weird, because it was essentially, what's his name, Lissandra or something, is that it? Or however you pronounce it.
Yeah.
He is just this depressed guy who can't see any hope, and just in the middle of a kid's game, things get the most dark.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
that's all the Pokemon villain motivation. Black and White was the guy was oh, what trainers are actually doing is enslaving Pokemon, so we need to make sure that all Pokemon can be free. And you have to beat that opinion out of him.
Because because essentially Serena, I think it was, her story is she's getting really bummed out all the time because you're a group of friends and everyone has their role in the group of friends. One of them is the collector, and one of them loves dancing because it's Pokemon, and she wants to be a Pokemon trainer. Except you just fight everything and just get the legendary Pokemon, and everything goes right all the time, and she just gets beat 5 times.
Oh, do you mean Shauna, or do you mean the female trainer model?
I mean your rival.
Okay, because I had the guy, and I feel like he was less. I don't know. He seemed kind of okay with you just taking all the glory in mine.
She gets okay by the end of it, but there's a bit in the middle where you think, oh wait, is this going to go with her joining Team Flare because you've depressed her?
No, the thing that's weird about this game is that they give you all of those 5 friends. Normally it's you and a rival who is much more antagonistic, outright. In the first game, it's the professor's grandson, and you're kind of the favorite. And even though he's in the first Pokemon game, you beat all of the Elite Four, and you get to the very end, and it's oh, well, you could fight the champion, but your rival just came and beat the champion before you, and you have to fight your rival as the champion one last time at the very end. And then so the whole concept is that your rival was always better than you until the very end when you prevailed because you loved your Pokemon more. And then in the second game, your rival actually steals a Pokemon from the professor, and he's an outright bad guy. And yeah, the weird, like, we're all friends and the power of friendship nonsense that happens in this game feels less, like, it feels like there was potential to do things with those characters that didn't happen, other than Tierno's dancing is some of the best animations in that game.
Oh,
I wish there was, like, a mini game where you could actually dance and do Pokemon dancing. Why is that not a thing?
I don't know. I don't know, because he comes up at the end, he's like, I'm going to fight you now. No, can I not have a dance competition with this guy? This guy's all about the dance. Let this guy do his thing. Because all you do is you just kill everything, and everyone loves you. Like, imagine you are a girl or a boy or anyone. You're a hiker. There we go. You're one of the hikers, and you are a Pokemon trainer, and you've got a few Pokemon. You're proud. You're proud of your team, and you're just going to stand there, wait for someone to fight you, and you've got these Pokemon you've leveled up, and this kid comes up to you. This kid comes up, he talks to you, and you're like, I'm going to challenge you. And suddenly, he throws a Pokeball, and out comes the legendary Pokemon that has been lost for 1,000 years and kills you in one hit. Like, what the... Think about that. And then you react to it by like, oh, you won because you're so friendly. Like, no, he's got this god in his pocket that he's going to throw out and destroy you.
I mean, yeah, the incongruity of the Pokemon narrative has always been that.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing in this one. I don't know if it's always that, but it was amazing to see.
Because you always end up like with legendaries, and you can use them or not. But if you use them, the narrative immediately breaks down to where you are a 10-year-old running around with the Pokemon no one's ever seen, rumored to exist, the power to rend time and space.
And you destroy everyone. And also, like, when your friends fight you at the end, and you're towards the end, and you're like, I'm going to just challenge my friends in one last battle, and you stomp all of them with your god. And they're like, oh, thank you, we're such good friends. And it just makes your guy seem like a psychopath. He does that one little fist bump at every victory. It's just so weird. I mean, obviously it's going to be, but it's just... If you actually consider what the implications are of Pokemon, it's really weird.
No, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Because it is weird, abandoned children in a socialized wonderland where nothing bad can actually happen except for when you cause animals to fight each other to the death.
Except that story of, like, genocide.
Sure,
genocide.
But that's all backstory. That's a long time ago. Pokemon's weird. I'll give you that.
It is. I'm pro it being weird. And there were bits with the rival and with like the few, because the writing is good. You say like there are good NPCs saying funny, crazy stuff. Over 9,000 references because apparently 2013, and then they don't do anything substantial with any of it. It just is weird.
Yeah,
and I think
that's
they
fair.
could have.
I guess to me the joy is that like I know enough about the world where like navigating the mechanics are trivial at this point, so I kind of know what's coming, and to me it's like go into a new area, what cool thing am I going to find? Oh, here's a bunch of nonsense, but like on my 10th battle I found the crazy sword ghost and I caught him and I raised him the entire game, and by the end he was unbeatable, and I like that. I like building that team. Like at the base, it's a monster tamer RPG, which is weird because I feel like I hate those characters in more traditional RPGs. It's like you have a party of 8 and one of them is a monster tamer. Who wants to use the dumb monster tamer? But because Pokemon, each monster has such diversity of moveset and things like, and there's so many of them that I find like finding a good one and raising it up and realizing how much you can just sweep everything is fun. I don't know. It's a simple mechanical joy. There's not a lot of thought to playing through the main story of Pokemon. No. But it like Dragon Quest, as I brought up, it's a comfort food RPG. It's not hard. It's not like deep. It's not going to set anyone's world on fire, but I find them pleasant. I think there's a space for games like that, but yeah, I don't. As like watching a bunch of my friends play Pokemon for the first time, I realized just how unapproachable those games are as someone coming into the 6th gen in 2013.
I don't.
Because everyone's like, "Where's the Pikachu?" It's like you don't want a Pikachu; they suck.
What everyone is actually like is, hey, I caught a Pikachu in 5 minutes. Guess I can stop playing Pokemon now. Ha 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 ha.
And then I get angry because I'm like, you don't want a Pikachu, it's terrible.
I had a Pikachu in my party at the end of the game. The Pikachu I caught in the first woods.
You didn't ever evolve it?
No. Just had a Pikachu till the end of the game.
But Raichu's so much. Why? This is the thing. Like
because the game was so easy, I never felt compelled to engage in all those.
Also, like straight up, the game does not tell you how to evolve Pikachu.
I assume it's you have to collect a stone.
Yeah, it's like you give it an elect stone and it evolves.
I knew that somehow.
Like there are so many weird one-off evolutions at this point because it used to be there was a couple stone ones, there was a couple you had to trade and they'd evolve. And then most of them just evolve through levels. Now there's like, it has to be exposed to a certain area at night, and then it'll evolve. Or it has to love you and then get traded to another person holding an item, and then it'll evolve. And it's ridiculous.
And all that stuff is great, but the game never demands or even asks you to do any of it. It's not designed about... So then when you do it, it's all unsatisfying and leads to a existential, wait, why am I doing this? Wait, why am I doing any video games? Wait, oh no!
Because you want to collect them all, even though at this point, that is... Unless you've been playing the entire time and just have cleared saves where you've been getting everything through trades and stuff, literally impossible to catch them all in X and Y. If those are the two, like even if you have both games, you cannot catch them all.
I enjoyed the bits of, like, I saw the potential enough when it was there that I am tempted to go back and get one of the games that's not as unsatisfying.
The rumor is that they might remake Ruby Sapphire. It's what I've heard going around Twitter. And if that's the case, just wait for that, because those games are pretty good.
Okay, because also, if I did go back, I wouldn't have all the other improvements they've made, like EXP share. Which,
yeah, the new XP share. Let me tell you,
I can't imagine what that game
the
would be like
rolling
without.
up. It just used to be way harder to say I'm going to put this new guy in my team, and just see what happens. There's a lot of things in XY which you haven't really gone into because it's not interesting unless you're going to play that metagame that rapidly speed up training and leveling up and things like that. There's so many shortcuts in that game that aren't really. Like, it's not really exposed how important they are. They're just left for you to figure out. Pokemon is a game built for online communities at this point. Like, if you're not using a wiki or on a message board or talking with your friends, you're probably playing it wrong. And that's weird, especially coming from Nintendo, who is a company that seems incapable of doing anything online.
The other friends that I know that played Pokemon are big, like also huge Pokemon fans and have been disappointed by XY on that front because they felt it was like, yeah, that's another Pokemon game, but there's no, and they've just made it easier for the one side of it, but they're disappointed by, the depth of all the extra Pokemon stuff. The utter lack of endgame, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Which is a bummer to me because if I wanted to get into Pokemon, I want to play it. I'd want to play for the hard part. I'd want to actually engage with the systems that I can tell are there.
Yeah. In 6 months they'll release a new online client where basically you select all the Pokemon from everyone available in drop-down boxes and then put in whatever stat alchemy you want, and then you fight. And then it becomes like its purest form where all of the leveling is irrelevant. It is your math better than your opponent's math because it's all about like predicting what they have and then countering it and then making sure the numbers work out. It's a weird game, Pokemon.
Yeah.
Because at some point it's literally you throwing out a number and hoping it's bigger than their number.
And also on a completely different note, why are they still making 2 games every time?
To encourage the community. I don't know. At this point, it's probably just tradition.
Yeah, they're doing it because they always do it. But
I know you don't have to encourage the community at this point because the community is so entrenched in the culture of Pokemon. Because Pokemon is about that game is about playing it with people and having the I figured this out or I found this thing.
Yeah.
And you can do that all the wiki, or you can just do it with your friends. I mean, it works just as well either way. I think it's way shorter with the wiki. It was interesting because this game is the first one that was released like worldwide simultaneously. Used to be by the time it came to America, all of the locations of all the secrets were just on a wiki for months now because people got the Japanese version. And this game was the experience of, well, how do you get this thing? I don't know. Are there secrets? Maybe. Who knows? It turns out that there aren't, but there could have been. It would have been like there, at the end of Gold Silver, after you beat the Elite Four, you get a monorail pass where you can take a train and explore the entire map of the first Pokemon game of Red and Blue, and that was a crazy thing as a kid. And a secret like that is so hard to keep now with the internet in 2013. But the way Pokemon was released, it's possible that could have happened, and it would have been amazing.
I think the difference there is that the first Pokemon game was so I'm sure when they hit and all the cartoon and stuff, Pokemon was the biggest thing in the world, and so then realizing that you could go back to the first one, I bet was just the best surprise ever.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can replicate that. Even if you got something similar, you couldn't get anything on that level.
Oh no, sure. But I'm just saying, like, the discovery of like community finding things in a game is, I think, key to what the initial appeal of Pokemon was, and still kind of is on some level, even though that's a weirder thing now. Like what discovery means in a world with wikis devoted to specific games.
And now it seems like you're just describing Dark Souls in some way.
Like, in a community way, absolutely.
Yeah, and then a bunch of...
Like, mechanically, not at all, but...
No, yeah, no. Like, here's a bunch of systems, and guys on message boards they're gonna break this shit down over a series of years. Yeah.
Or then, like, the competitive scene is even more like StarCraft, where it's like, here's the way we do things, and then someone creates a counter strategy, and then everyone starts using the counter strategy, so someone creates a new strategy. Like, it's just cyclical, like, over the generations of what strategies work, even in a same generation of Pokemon, because the community is so connected that everyone adopts the same tactics, and then they counter that, and then someone creates counter that, and then it creates counter that, and then everyone's using kind of the same things all the time.
But
it's weird.
I thought I was gonna win because I love my Pokemon the most.
No, you will never win because you love your Pokemon the most.
That stuff is so bullshit. Just someone needs to just go up to them and say, no, these Pokemon are tools. You have your math, you have your brain, and you have your Pokemon. Fuck your love.
Yep.
Who nicknames their Pokemon? I mean, come on.
Monsters. Sentimental monsters.
Don't kid yourself here.
So, I think that's it. I think we've exhausted Pokemon.
I think we have.
Which almost makes me sad, because I feel like... no, it does make me sad, because I beat Pokemon, and I'm like, that was an okay Pokemon. It wasn't great. I appreciate the monumental effort turning that series into, like, a 3D thing is. It can't be easy. It's an RPG with literally like hundreds of characters. How do you do that?
But also that kind of gives it no benefit past the superficial, oh look, everything's in 3D.
Yep. No. I mean, it was going to happen eventually. I feel like that, like, this game is the closest to what the show represents and what, like, people who said, I want a console Pokemon that's like the games were. Because those people don't know what they were asking for.
My friends were asking for that, and then they grew up a little bit, and then they were asking for, can they just make a dark Pokemon RPG? I'm like, Pokemon's pretty dark.
I mean, I wouldn't want a gritty Pokemon. Because the thing I like about Pokemon is that some of the designs are super stupid, and some of the characters are really goofy.
And then they all fight, and like you'll get your Blaziken just like angular look. I'm gonna kill him.
No, like they basically give you Pokemon Goku.
Yes, exactly. Pokemon Goku.
And he can be fighting like a giant amorphous pink blob.
I like Mega Blastoise, maybe my favourite design in the game. It's like, how are we going to make Blastoise more extreme? I don't know, why don't we combine the two cannons into just one fuck-off cannon on his head? It's the biggest cannon you've ever seen.
I was a big fan of Mega Ampharos with his flowing locks of white hair.
I have to look up Mega Ampharos now. Yep. Yep, that's great.
Yep.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. So, yeah, Pokemon. It's a thing. It will continue to be a thing. At this point, I think Pokemon will outlive us both.
Do you? Really?
Yeah, I do. I think that there are always... I think that you have to be introduced to Pokemon young, maybe. But I think that there will always be kids being introduced to Pokemon. Because as much as we complain about the way systems are exposed and stuff, if you're a kid who's just been like, this is a video game like every other video game, and have, like, this is your game for the summer, it's a pretty big, crazy experience.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of stuff there. And if your friends are playing it too, like, the interest of it compounds.
I feel like the world will move on from Pokemon within 20 years. Within 10 years, even.
I remember people said Pokemon was a fad when the first Pokemon came
I don't
out.
think it's a fad, but I don't know. I have a feeling. Pokemon's not going to be around forever. I don't even know if it's going to be around in 10 years.
I think that you're crazy.
Want to make a bet?
Yeah, sure, we'll bet. What do you want to bet?
Okay, I bet $10 that in...
If Pokemon is around in 10 years, you
10
need to
years.
buy me the Pokemon that comes out in 10 years.
Okay. I mean, I think I think you're probably going to win that, but I'll take the bet. I'll buy you the Pokemon in 10 years.
And if there's no Pokemon, I owe you a game.
Okay, sure. But still,
I'll buy you the new Digimon game. How about that?
Digimon ain't gonna fucking exist. To be fair, the fact that Digimon exists now kind of proves you right. If Digimon is still around, then yeah, of course there's gonna be Pokemon until the end of time.
I don't know. When's the last Monster Rancher? Like,
I don't know. Are they still making card captors?
next month we're gonna play Pokemon the trading card game for the Game Boy Color and talk about that.
Yep. Or we're just gonna go out and buy Pokemon cards and see what's happened to Pokemon cards in 15 years.
I looked. Now all the pictures are CG and they look terrible.
What?
It used to be they got a really diverse set of artists, but I feel like every picture I've seen is just a gross CG model that looked like it fell out of like 1996.
Because I remember Pokemon having crazy, well done drawings.
Yeah, they were beautiful. Like sometimes it was a dumb CG model, but sometimes it was an amazing piece of art.
Yeah, like that's. I remember just playing a bunch of Pokemon cards back in the day, and everything just looking crazy. But where I'm looking for new Pokemon cards. Whatever. Yep, they look dumb.
Yep.
That looks like garbage.
Yeah. It's like, oh, the fifth season of Reboot got real weird. And that'll do it for games this month. Before we go, we have plugs, but before that we have questions. If you want to ask us a question, you can get to us on our Twitter, which is Jackson.
Twitter.com/abnormalmapping. Ah, shit! I can't talk. Twitter.com/abnormalmapping.
Or you can get to us on Gmail.
Abnormal mapping? No. Questions are... No, I'm bad at this. I'm very bad at this. I'm a poor podcastman.
What's our email address?
This is a test?
Yes.
You said it at the beginning of the show, and it is... It's not abnormalmapping@gmail.com.
No.
There's a bit before.
No.
There's a bit after?
Yes.
abnormalmappingpodcast@gmail.com.
Yes, that is our email. Thank you. Or you can ask us a question on Tumblr. You can get us on Tumblr at abnormalmapping.tumblr.com, because I don't trust Jackson to know that.
That was the one I did know, but as you can see, all three of these ways to reach us are extremely memorable and succinct.
They're pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'm just dumb.
So, our first question comes to us off of Twitter from Scott Emsley? Is that how you say that?
Scott Emsley, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And his question is, how important is interactivity versus story in games given such titles as 30 Flights of Loving? Do you have an answer? Are you dead?
I I was about to say something. I was waiting for you to say something, and then it was silent. I was like, no, I just got to ride the silence out now. Um, phew. I think with that one, I would say that interactivity. It. I don't know what he means by 30 Flights of Loving because.
Okay, so I think the core of this question is that 30 Flights of Loving is a game that is based around you walking through an environment, a story happens to you.
Yeah, but it is extremely. The fact that it is interactive completely defines that story. I don't. I think that interactivity in games should be a medium for expressing story. I don't think.
But like, I guess,
I
how do you
understand.
identify interactivity? Like, because I don't think you click on anything in that game. You just literally use WASD to move and look
I
around with
think
the mouse.
any input that results in an output um, is interactivity with a video game. I'm fairly sure that's what I call it as. Walking through a space is still interacting with a video game.
Okay.
That's what it is to me, at least.
I mean, I'm willing to agree with you. I'm just trying to represent what I assume his point
Yeah.
is.
Well, I think his point is more that is it about if you're trying to convey meaning for a video game, how much do the mechanics matter versus how much the actual content of the story matters?
In the case of 30 Flights of Loving, 30 Flights of Loving is a weird thing because it's obviously experimental in that it's trying to marry your actions traversing a space with like traditional cinematic techniques like montage and jump cuts. And that's kind of really the actual point of that game, is to see how well that will work.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think it works really well. I think 30 Flights of Loving is a really amazing game, but inherently the interactivity in that game is the important thing. The fact that you're running down a hallway and suddenly it jump cuts and there's like cops around you and you're pushing a guy on a cart and it jump cuts and you're on a motorcycle and it jump cuts and you're in an apartment with the woman you loved who betrayed you or whatever the actual story is, because the actual story in 30 Flights of Loving is totally irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. The actual story there is it's a heist movie, yo. Well, it's parts of a heist movie.
Yeah,
It's
the interactivity is how you marry movement through space and movement through time in a narrative framework that goes further in games as chasing cinema, as because like a lot of games are like, oh, we're inspired by Hollywood movies, but what that means is in between the parts where you do stuff, you watch cutscenes.
yeah,
And 30 Flights of Loving is like, no, we can actually make this more of a, you are traversing the space represented by edits and shot selection that are much more actually core parts of cinema.
exactly. And in 30 Flights of Loving, both interactivity and story are essentially the same thing there. Whereas, for example, in a game like The Swapper, they are kept way more separate, as we were talking about earlier. Uh, whereas there's a more interesting question of how much of those mechanics could you take out, and how much of that game could you like remove and still have it be as impactful with the ideas and story that it's trying to suggest to you.
Yeah. And the only thing you could take out is movement, and if you do that, it just turns into a small animated movie. And if you do that, I feel like the point is lost.
Oh, I agree, but I mean more like you can like cut. I mean, cutting content and cutting like you could cut the like you say the space sections, or you could. Would that game be as interesting if the later puzzles weren't as
Oh,
difficult?
you were talking about the Swapper. I'm talking about 30 Flights of Loving.
Oh yes, no. I'm saying there that they are. That's such a small, finely refined thing that is like, you can't separate any part of that game from any other part of that game because it is essentially an idea in game form. Whereas if you look at if you look at that question and apply it to more longer form
Oh,
projects,
I think there's a lot of stuff you can cut out the Swapper and it would still be at its core the same thing.
well, exactly. And what part is the important part? There is,
And I think that says more about who the player is and what they take away than what the game presents.
yeah,
Because you
I
could just
agree.
play that as a cool puzzle game, and it's fine that way.
Yeah.
I am less interested in that part of the game because I don't really like puzzle platformers are a dime a dozen, honestly, as far as I'm concerned. But
Pretty much.
the important part is how that gun that shoots people, what that means about ideas of what the self is.
Yeah.
So I guess that's our answer.
Also, see our entire discussion on Pokemon's narrative.
I don't. Did we talk about interactivity in that game? I don't know. I feel like we
We
didn't.
talked about both of them. In Pokemon, is the most separate rooms. It is, oh, I'm fighting, or oh, I'm engaging in seeing what this town's going on with. Like, the story and the interactivity of Pokemon are just kept in completely different continents, is my point.
I guess that answers the question. Or does it? I don't know. I'm
I don't
not
know,
going to continue thinking about it. Our second question comes from Paul Douglas, also via Twitter. He says, lots of speculation about Crash Bandicoot making a comeback this generation. Either of you into the idea?
I would like a new Crash Bandicoot game, and then it'd be really, really bad. Then I'd be bummed.
I would like... The thing is, I think the first Crash Bandicoot game, like the original PlayStation Crash Bandicoot game, is a really interesting thing. I will link to it in the article, or in the podcast notes. There's an amazing multi-part making of Crash Bandicoot feature that anybody should read that deals with like the birth of the PlayStation and how 3D games were even being conceived of at the time, because it was a real mess. Anyone who had a pre-PlayStation or 64 console that tried to do 3D can attest to that, because they're all garbage. But I don't think there's anything that Crash Bandicoot does or represents that is maybe interesting anymore.
Well, it is a platformer you remember from when you were younger.
Sure,
It is.
but like Mario has a very specific jump and like traversal mechanic, and at this point, like Mario is about the jump and the suits. Like that's what Mario is.
Yeah.
And Ratchet and Clank is about like sliding on rails and crazy novelty guns. That's what that is.
To me, Crash is about
Spinning into boxes,
Crash is about
racially problematic tribal masks,
Yep, and essentially speed.
running into the camera.
Because it is a straight line. Yes, running into the camera. Thank you, Matt. Because it is a straight line, and there are either boxes you jump on to get things or boxes you avoid to get explosion. It is far more reflex based, far more just I want to get from A to B as quickly as possible. Whereas Mario again is the slightly more Mario has more finesse than Crash Bandicoot. Statements that won't offend anyone there.
I mean, that's a given. Come on.
Exactly.
Anyone who wants to argue that with us, write in, and we'll have you on to have that discussion, because I think it'd be interesting to have. You're wrong, but we'll have that discussion.
But I think that is Crash's core identity is way more.
So what you're saying is that Crash is just Sonic.
No, because Sonic isn't as much about going fast as it purports to be. Whereas Crash doesn't actually go fast, but it's about...
I never played Crash as a fast game. I was a pretty methodical Crash player.
Then why were you playing Crash Bandicoots? Maybe this is just going to be how we play games differently then.
It's weird, because with Mario, I'm a don't stop for nothing kind of guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much all platforms for me. That's how you do them.
I don't know. Maybe I think for me it was something about like how much it emphasized getting all the collectible doodads. Like you got to break all the boxes, so I'd do that.
Yeah,
the fact that it rated how many boxes he broke, even if I don't even know if that unlocked anything, I don't remember. But the fact that it rated it meant that I had to do it. Like it influenced behavior by giving you that metric. Mario doesn't care how many Goombas you stomp or how many question mark blocks you hit, which is why my goal is to just be as death-defying and crazy fast as possible.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, I apart from the straight line obstacles, which is pretty much Mario, Crash doesn't have anywhere near the identity that those other games have at all.
And at this point, Crash is owned by Activision, which, what are they going to do? Are they going to create a line of RFID tag toys that you can put on a portal?
Probably. How would you like to see all those masks hanging up for kids? Just be like, buy your own Aku mask and be sad or something.
Maybe, like, if you put on the mask, the camera in the current gen of consoles will recognize the mask, and then
Yes.
do something like load a new level.
Yes, exactly. This is clearly where we're going in this new generation of consoles. Crash Bandicoot
They're not
masks.
gonna make a new Crash Bandicoot game that's for like people who actually care about games. It's gonna be for kids because it's
Yeah,
Activision and it's a mascot character.
pretty much. And well, they tried that, and they made terrible games.
I mean, in an ideal world, I'd like to see more well thought out platformers, and I think that Crash's utter lack of like exploration based levels, because there's no like exploring in Crash Bandicoot. Maybe in like the ones after Naughty Dog left, but not in the original ones. Is like I'd be interested in seeing something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree.
Maybe in like a I don't know, like Rayman Legends exist. Who thought Rayman was going to come back?
No one. And then it did, and it was great.
So I'm willing to admit that maybe there's room for Crash Bandicoot. But if we want to talk about PlayStation games that should exist, where's Parappa the Rapper? Where's Parappa the Rapper?
In the past.
No, Parappa the Rapper lives in our hearts, Jackson.
I've never played Parappa the Rapper.
I mean, it's hard to do that now because, well, the PSP version's fine, I guess. If you play like the PS1 version on a modern TV, the lag makes that game nearly impossible. Because it was a rhythm game before Guitar Hero, which means it was stupid hard. But Parappa the Rapper's a great game. He's a dog who raps.
He's called Parappa.
He wants to believe. I want to believe that the world still has room for Parappa the Rapper.
Okay. I can believe that.
I guess that's my answer. I will throw in that maybe they should try to make a new Medieval because Callum exists.
I've never played Medieval, but I'm told it is very good and they should try that again.
It's an interesting idea. I think the character has a lot of potential. The game itself is a 3D platformer on the PlayStation, so it's garbage, but there's a lot of like, there's a lot of flavor, and I think it's hard to create cool characters with flavor anymore or at all. So,
Yeah.
Why try risking a new one when you can use one that works?
Yeah.
Or something. That is the most corporate response. I should feel ashamed of myself.
You should, but you're meaning that as a guise to get cool things back. As in, this won't happen any other way, so you're going to have to do it under...
Maybe it will. I mean, there was that Boogerman Kickstarter, right? People are resurrecting the ones nobody cares about, so...
That is true. They are doing that, yes. I didn't even know it was a game before.
Boogerman? Oh yeah, it was dumb. It was terrible.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to not know anything about it.
You know what also was terrible? Earthworm Jim. I'll throw down for that.
Yep, I'm not going to argue there. I've never played it, and I don't want to.
You're fine.
Good.
And Glover. Glover's pretty bad too. I'm just going to mention Glover on every podcast.
Okay.
That's our new meme, Glover.
What if they brought back Banjo and Kazooie?
They did, and it was great, and nobody bought it. So,
Boo!
Banjo-Kazooie, nuts and bolts, in bargain bins now. You could probably buy that game for about $3.
You probably could.
And it's great.
It's all about that. I mean, it's not actually.
It's one of the reasons I will keep my Xbox 360 until it breaks.
Just so in case you feel the need to go back and play some more Banjo-Kazooie and nuts and bolts.
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 games that justify keeping that thing around. That's one of them. And our third and final question comes to us via Tumblr. Destiny Sturdivant asks, what is game?
God damn it. God damn it, Matt. Yeah, god damn it. Thanks. Yeah, video games, okay.
What is game, Jackson?
I don't know, but I know it when I see it.
That's really your answer? I feel like this is a bigger philosophical question.
What is game? Game is... What are games, or what is game?
What is game?
What is game?
I mean, you could, if you want to answer what are games, I think that's a valid answer to that question.
Yeah, but what is game? As the concept of game... That seems to be more... That implies a different question, which is nothing to do with video games. As in...
Does it? Does it really?
What is game? As in... game? What is game as a thing you can possess? Like, I have game. What is game?
I don't think she's asking about
I don't think she is
game
as well.
as a social idea.
Yeah, but if you phrase it as what is game, that is what the question means.
Okay, Jackson, you're the expert. Tell us, what is game?
Hang on, do you mean video? Game. Thanks. Thanks, Matt.
Don't
Thanks,
thank me,
Chris.
thank our listener.
Thanks, listener. Thanks.
Yep. Now my girlfriend knows you hate her.
No. Because you're telling me that was a genuine question and not, oh, this would be hilarious if I send him what is game.
I mean, you know why she asked.
I know what she asked. And I know why you told me not to look at it now. I know everything has become clear. It was a moment of... I dropped the coffee cup and everything was clear. I saw what is game written on the board and it all made sense now.
I didn't expect us to throw you for such a loop. I don't think it's a hard question.
What is the answer then?
Tetris.
Tetris is game.
And that's the final word on that.
Tetris is game.
You can find me at Litrock, Litrock.
And at Tylia002, which is TYLEA002 on Twitter.
And you can find both of us at Abnormal Mapping. And we'll be back next month where we're talking about 2 video games. Jackson,
Confirmed.
what game did you bring to the table?
What is game? Vanquish and the other one that I've forgotten what it's called. Shivah.
You chose Vanquish by Platinum Games. And I chose the Shivah Kosher Edition, which is a special edition of the adventure game The Shivah, which came out in 2006 by Wajidai Games. Should be pretty good. We might have a guest. I don't know. I haven't figured that part out yet.
I'm excited to play both of those. Rocket Legs.
I've been playing a lot of... Well, I played one of 5 acts of Vanquish.
Oh, it's got acts?
It has 5 acts.
Oh man. Okay, we're going to have to end this podcast right now then.
Why?
God damn it, man.